We should be live in about a minute.
All right. Just a heads up, I'm recovering from a bad throat, so there
That's all
might
right.
be
That's cool.
good issues in the middle.
And we should be live in about a minute.
How long have you been with them?
So it's been around 3 years, and we're live. We're live. Cool.
All right.
So I guess we have around 30 people who are already waiting, and they're saying hi on YouTube. Let me also okay. Let the link be here. Let's begin. So hi everyone. Good morning, and a huge hello to Neeraj from this side of Career Camp. And we are super duper excited to have you here with us. And thank you so much for taking out the time to discuss things with the students. They
Mm.
are like having a ton of questions, which some of which I already shared with you. You might have seen everything ranging from how your life is shaped up to how your career is shaped up. That is there in that list. So people just setting down the agenda without wasting a lot of time about discussing things about what is career camp. Let's just get to it straight away and ask as many questions as we want with Neeraj, so that we make the most of the time that he's given us. For the first part, we'll do it will be around 40 to 45 minutes. And for the first part, we'll discuss the questions that students have asked. And then we'll be taking live questions from YouTube. So this webinar is live on YouTube also, and we are using Zoom in the background to broadcast it. All right. So let's just first take some general questions from my own curiosity in terms of your journey with programming and development. And just before that, is everyone getting both our voices? If you could say just a hello, Neeraj.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Can anyone just put it up on YouTube? If you are getting our voice, just a thumbs up over there.
So I don't have the YouTube link open. Do you want me to
Oh,
check?
that's all right. That's all right. They are getting it. Yes, I've got a confirmation. Cool. So first, we'd like to get to know about you a little. We've seen the LinkedIn profile till now, and super curious around your programming and development journey. Like, when did you actually start with it?
Sure. I can give a brief summary. I guess even before we start, thanks for having me here. Definitely happy to provide any information, advice that I can. I've been through the same journey that you guys are going through, just a few years ahead. So feel free to ask any questions and I'll do my best to answer.
Thanks a lot.
So specifically in terms of my programming journey, let's see. I guess I think the first time I got exposed to programming was probably high school, like 11th and 12th in Delhi. I think generally I liked the mathematical aspect of it, being able to like think logically and get programs to do something, but I wasn't necessarily particularly passionate about it in any way. And when I actually had the choice of picking my major in undergrad, I ended up going with electronics when I joined Roorkee. But
Okay.
within, I think, first 3 or 4 months, I realized I do not want to do electronics. I want to do computer science within the first computer science course elective that we had. So I worked pretty hard to switch my major from electronics to computer science. And yeah, it's been what 10 plus years since then, and I'm still excited about the field.
So you did get to switch your majors from your branch from
Yeah,
electronics to. Okay,
yeah, at
cool.
the end of my
I
first year.
also did that in electronics, but didn't switch it. uh, okay, so what exactly were, according to you, the difficult parts when you started off with programming? When you realized that you want to get into this field specifically. So, what were initial difficult parts that you had to overcome as a part of threshold? Because how I can relate to this question in terms of students is a lot of them are doing programming for the first time or left it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or are working in a different field. So
Mm,
there is that initial threshold that they tend to cross, and after that things go smoother, or they are able to explore everything. What was that for
mm.
you?
Wow. I'm not sure if I can point to any specific threshold per se.
Hmm.
I mean, I think if I really had to go back to my time, maybe at some point the realizations I had was when I got into programming, at one point I felt I was trying to learn as much as language specifics as possible. I think Java was pretty big back then, and I was learning generics in Java, all the templatized formats.
Hmm.
But over time, I realized what's really much more valuable is just learning the fundamentals,
Hmm.
how to think about a problem in the programming construct, how to build a program. And all the language specifics are something you can always pick up on the job as well. So if you're really getting stuck on any specific language dynamics and you're directly jumping into C, C++, where you're struggling with, starting with something simpler like Python, which is a little bit more closer to
Hmm.
like natural language, I guess, might be a better start. Just focusing more on the fundamentals, programming constructs than
Hmm.
language specifics.
Cool. Um, and I mean, super curious to know, what was your first project in development?
I, what do you mean by project? Are you talking about like
Project
when I
as
started?
in, people might be making a social media website these days, or maybe even a calculator. So what was one innovative thing that you began with when you started making building stuff?
So I think the first program that I can remember of was maybe making a program to play tic-tac-toe.
Okay.
This was in my first year as undergrad when I was still in electronics.
Hmm.
I forget exactly how I came across it, but I was just sitting with a friend of mine who was doing electrical engineering at that time
Hmm.
in his dorm room, and I really can't recall how it came about that, but it was like, hey, we need to make this tic-tac-toe program, a
Uh-huh.
computer that can play tic-tac-toe as smartly as possible. And I think it was the first time I pretty much stayed up all night to
Wow.
do some actual work, which was not academic work.
Okay. Okay. Great. And what about the first feature probably which you launched at Quora,
So
if we can talk about it?
my first project at Quora was to build the iPhone app. So pretty
Okay.
much my first week at the job, I think one of the co-founders basically said, "Hey, we've been looking to develop an iPhone app for a while, but
Hmm.
like I think our best strategy is to get an existing employee to learn Objective C and then build the app. So how do you feel about it?" And that was pretty much my first conversation in my first week at a job ever.
Hmm.
So I was pretty taken aback, but I was like, sure, I don't know Objective C, but if you want me to pick it up, like, I can give it a shot. And then for the next 6 months, I was learning Objective C and building the iPhone app.
Hmm. Which brings me to another important question. Although we, uh, a number of times when we begin programming with our students, we do have this
Mm,
discussion. Choosing a language. So as you
mm,
mentioned that, it is more important to get into the fundamentals of things, and maybe we
mm,
could begin with the easiest language that we feel there is, or maybe
mm,
like usually people begin with Python in that sense.
mm,
Um, Once we have the hold of that, or the grab of that
mm.
conceptual understanding, um, is it super difficult to switch between languages, or has it been for you?
I don't think so, at least not for the day-to-day job. At some point, if you're really working on very low-level optimizations in some specific field,
Hmm.
then you might have built like 10 plus years of industry experience and
Hmm.
all the ins and outs of a language.
Hmm.
At that time, maybe it'll be harder to get that level command in a different language.
Hmm.
But for the first job, first few years of the industry, I don't think that should be a problem at all. Really focusing on the fundamental constructs is the most important thing. Like
Nice.
as I was saying,
So,
even for my first job, like I did not know Objective C when I joined Quora, and my first project at Quora was to learn Objective C and to build the iPhone app.
I think there you go. Team, I would call them a team for us all at Career Camp. You have him saying himself that, the language part is secondary. The building up of logic is primary for you.
Mm,
And maybe 10 years down the line, or even 5 years down the line, when you're specifically working on the language and doing things related to, maybe optimizing even the language itself, releasing new libraries into it, then
mm,
could be a point when, that language would matter. Otherwise, at this point of time, just understand the logic first.
exactly.
Okay. Uh, Picking up questions specifically from the form that we ask the students to fill, so that we have a couple of questions before we
Mm,
take it up from YouTube. Um, so there is this thing in everyone's head that I want to go into this specific company, and will you be able to get me an interview over there? And around the same thing, there is a question: what should be the strategy and areas of focus to get in the Big Four? Now,
mm.
I'm sure we might both might have the same answer to it, but still taking it from your side, does Big Four or getting into Big Four even matter? Or like, if it does, then what is the strategy around it?
Okay. I mean, I guess does it matter or not is more of a personal question
Hmm.
on what your ambitions look like.
Uh-huh.
My personal opinion would be like there's plenty of good opportunities out there for people who are interested in the software field.
Hmm.
And like even when I had to first choose, I chose Quora over other big four or any other big companies, and I really enjoyed my experience there. There were hundreds of other similar, maybe not hundreds, but at least like tens of other good startups in the
Hmm.
valley at that time as well. I'm sure even right now in India, you have a lot of good options that you don't necessarily need to choose big four, but maybe you have particular reasons why, if you need a really comfortable, stable job,
Hmm.
that might be a route to go towards. For the second part about what's the strategy to get into Big Four or any company for that matter, I think I also saw some points around like how much does your degree and masters matter. So the way I typically look at it is all your resume, whatever skills you can show, matters to get you an initial interview call. Like any company cannot talk to every candidate who's interested, so they need to do some initial screening.
Hmm.
So you need to have something that stands out for them for you to clear that screening process, whether it's, oh, you have a really high GPA at a university, or you've cleared some good hackathons or done some homework programming contests, or you have good referrals from coding ninjas or whatever other ways you get through in. After that, I think it really comes down to doing well in the interview process, showing your skills there.
Cool.
I guess I can go into more details of the interview process if
Hmm.
uh, I'm not sure what
I'll,
level of detail you're looking for
okay,
here.
I have a question reserved for that also. I'll come to it. Um, So I guess there are some on the side of a little bit being straight away or point blank questions that they've asked.
Mhm.
Uh, what is one thing you still struggle with in terms of programming or development? If there is, I'm pretty sure there would be very rare cases of that.
So, sorry, I don't know. I didn't get into my career trajectory, I guess, but for the last 3 years, I've been more on the management side. Like I'm
Uh-huh.
supporting engineering teams in my engineering manager capacity.
Hmm.
So things I struggle with lately have more to do with
Hmm.
the EQ
Humans.
side of things, how to build better organizations, how to
Uh-huh.
set up better teams for success.
Hmm.
But so I think programming wise, my role is more just understanding the high level vision and the long term structure for any areas that I'm working towards.
Hmm.
Um, Given my role is a little bit more managerial, I sometimes struggle with just keeping up with the technological aspect and balancing the two. I
Hmm.
still both out of interest as well as to some extent to do a better job at my manager role. I need to keep up with the technological trends.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I can't think like there's no programming aspect that I struggle with, I guess, because that's not really part of my job anymore.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, let me pick another one. So there is someone super curious who's asking, how did you land your current role? I'm sure you've had enough experience at Quora, and then
Mm,
so I guess a little bit rephrasing, why the current role? Is it like a part of the trajectory that a developer takes in terms of his or her career, or did you specifically choose, and why would you choose this?
Sure. So I'm currently working as an engineering manager at Facebook.
Hmm.
Why I chose Facebook? So I've been at Quora for about 6.5, close to 7 years.
Hmm.
That was my first job. And it was an incredible experience. I was just learning new things every day. I really enjoyed everyone that I worked with. But especially given that it was also my first and only full-time job, I wanted to try a very diverse, different set of experience
Hmm.
just to expand horizons and learn what it's like to work at a different scale, different company, just the different challenges, different nature of work. So that's when I started looking around when I finished more than 6 years at Quora, and I heard great things about Facebook. Some of my best coworkers at Quora were from Facebook, so that was naturally the first place that I seeked out again. I went through the interview process, and then I landed the job.
Cool. And exactly how big was Quora when you joined in, like in terms of people?
I think we had 12 people in total.
12 people. So
It was
that's
early
pretty awesome
2011.
as compared to today. I mean, I guess almost all of us would have the app, be it iOS or Android, on our phones. Um okay. Someone pretty curious about your the way you function. How do you spend most of your time?
Most of my working time,
Yeah,
or
probably working time and working and learning time. How do you shape it up?
sure. So I think the day to day varies quite a bit. And again, I'm not sure how relevant this is going to be given my current day to day is more than 60% meetings, one on ones with people and my
Hmm.
seven partners. Maybe a couple of things that might be more relevant is I try to budget at least a few hours every week for more personal focus time, personal learnings time, which I spend sometimes on reading books,
Hmm.
lately more on the management side, but earlier a little bit more programming, even just trying out some random programming competitions, as well as just my own personal reflection time. So I think that's the main advice I would say, is like once you get into the industry, it can be very easy to just get too busy with the day-to-day tactical things. So explicitly budgeting time for your own longer term learning, figuring out what you want, and budgeting time for that learning and growth would be very valuable.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. I, Otherwise, I think my day to day as such varies a lot. I would say like I was saying 60+% meetings and some big blocks of time for focus for longer term thinking.
Cool. And so this
Zero.
is, I think, yeah, please. You were saying something.
I was just saying zero coding at this point
Zero
for.
coding at this point. And if I compare it to when you were, say, beginning with the coding part, was it
Mm.
um I mean, obviously it is going to be very different, but how was it then?
So if I had to look at my first 6 months at Quora, it was pretty much just 2-3 hours a day watching iPhone programming lectures, another hour maybe reading some books on iPhone, and rest of the time just writing code to build the app. So I guess majority of the time was just programming. As I learned and grew with the company, I ended up
Mhm.
spending more and more time helping others, mentoring, more time on code reviews, project planning. The first few months were pretty much just hands-on programming full day.
Cool. So there's this question that almost everyone would have in their head. Do tech companies give lower preference for both hiring and giving opportunities at work once you are hired to people who have not taken the traditional route to get their computer science education, that is maybe through college, but learn programming from other sources,
Mm.
like online courses or coding ninjas, boot camps, or any program
Mm.
like CareerCamp?
Sure. So I think I can answer the second part quickly. Maybe
Mhm.
the answer to the second one is definitely no.
Okay.
Like once you get in the job, the whoever is working with you, they do not care what your background looks like, how you got in.
Hmm.
It's really like matching the right people with the right project needs to get the job done. So at that point, all that matters is your skills.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only time where your background matters is in the initial screening process. As I
Mm-hmm.
was telling you earlier, companies will not have the bandwidth to go and talk to all the applicants. So they need some way to filter out the few candidates they want to talk to for any specific role.
Right.
So over there, if you have anything that can stand out, that helps.
Mm-hmm.
But even after you've reached the interview process phase, it does not matter as much on what your background looks like. At that point, like primarily, it's a function of what your interview performance will be.
So it all matters once you get in, you have that opportunity to bag and to
Yeah.
grow. Okay. Uh, just two more questions before we move on to your probably the way you interview people, uh, if when you hire. So
Mm.
one thing is specifically asking that what would you expect from us if we were working as your subordinates, as freshers
Mm.
under you,
As
when you
new,
hire or when people are working with you, like what are specific things that you look at in terms of working ethics maybe or skills as of now?
I guess when I'm hiring, and I'm sure that's true for a lot of the companies as well, is one, the skills that we look for in interview process. One would be just whether you have the right foundations.
Mm-hmm.
As I was saying, it does not matter whether you know a specific language or not. Maybe that might matter for some particular job profiles, but for most software engineering profiles, it's gonna more matter whether you have the right CS fundamentals, good problem solving skills in terms of like thinking of problems in terms of how to construct programs. Beyond that, soft skills are definitely important. How well you can work in a team, how well you can communicate, be open to feedback and other people's ideas versus how much you're going to just, go and work in an isolated environment.
Mm-hmm.
Most job profiles will require you to work with other people. Um, I think for new grads, those are probably the most important ones that people try to tease out during the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the last thing could be a little bit more around just what your growth mindset looks like regardless of where you start at from your current skill set, how much are you passionate and interested in learning and growing? That's a little bit harder to tease apart for new grads compared to people who've been in the industry for 5+ years. You can basically look at their trajectory and why they made certain decisions to understand how much they're learning and growing. For new grads, sometimes I look at what kind of side projects they've been doing to get some signal on what their interest and passion in the area looks like.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, so
And
yeah, along the same
that's
line.
interesting. That's interesting. So one last question before we'll just start get a brief on how does an interview process with you look like.
Hmm,
So till then, I'll ask the students that people just start preparing your questions and posting them on the YouTube chat, and I'll pick them up just after this. Okay. So the final question is, how easy or difficult is it for people to switch between fields? Example would be from web development to machine learning. I'm not sure how much of sense that would make, or from to data science or to any other field within the tech industry itself. So when I'm a developer to being another kind of a developer, is it pretty
hmm.
difficult, or like does it make sense or not? Um, Something from your insights or from you.
Sure. I think I'll go back to the point I was making around programming languages.
Mm-hmm.
The more deeper you go in any specific area, the more expertise you've built, the more impact you'll have in that area, and then the harder it will be for you to have that level impact in the next field, at least immediately in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've been doing web development for say 10 years and you've built a lot of expertise, all the existing frameworks, any new project comes up, exactly, you can map it out in your head, what needs to be built, what are the components.
Mm-hmm.
At that level, if you suddenly want to say, oh, I want to stop working on web development and start with machine learning, you'll probably just start as a new grad in machine learning again
Mm-hmm.
and learning the fundamentals again, the maths behind it, the current technologies, frameworks. So it will be a step back, at least in terms of your career trajectory, but it's possible, I guess, if you're willing to take that short-term hit, if you're really passionate in the new area that you want to go towards. But the later in your career you make that switch, the bigger the step back will be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, there have been students even right now who've been working as professionals in different fields, and so, but they are pretty much very much positive about starting as almost freshers into the tech field because they want to make a career out of it.
Yeah. So even if you look at my career, right? So my first project at Quora was Objective-C iPhone programming.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, I quickly switched into some other product work and then more backend systems,
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure type work. At this point, I've been doing more systems infra type work for 5+ years, more machine learning infrastructure. So now if I wanted to go back and do Android programming, that's probably going to take me some time to pick up again.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to do this switch in my first year career, it should be much, much easier.
Cool. Okay. So just before I ask you another question, would you have any specific questions to ask the student from your side? I can get them to answer on the chat on YouTube. Anything that you might be curious about, if you have anything.
I mean, I think so. For some of the questions you're asking, or for any new questions that they have, it might help to get a little bit more context, the background that the person is coming from, so I can answer and provide answers more catered that might be helpful for them.
Okay.
Like the questions like what does a day-to-day for me look like, it's really hard
Mm-hmm.
for me to
Yep.
understand what level of detail to get into
Exactly.
to provide useful value.
Right. Cool. Okay. So whenever you're putting in a question, people on YouTube, let's put in a little more context on it, as in why would you be asking that question? A very good example which Neeraj has given is that, if you're asking that what is your day-to-day routine, are you asking as when he was a student, when he was learning programming, or is it like right now in his current role as an engineering manager at Facebook? Or like in what context would you want to ask? And maybe a comparison with how you're doing it right now would also be better, like just to compare it with how it can be improvised on. Okay, so finally on this part, let's spend a couple of minutes on the way different interview processes take place, or I would say different steps in an interview process take place when you are hiring people in the role of a fresher, or maybe people alongside who are working alongside you. They're hiring people as a fresher, and what different types of people do interview a person who's getting hired, and what are the different kinds of rounds that are there that you've experienced till now?
Sure. So I think with the caveat that I would not be disclosing any specific internal details of any of the companies I work with or interview that.
That's cool.
I can provide a little bit more just high level generic framework around what I've seen in the interview process for new grads. And if there are any more specific questions in areas, I can see how much in depth we can go into.
Cool.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure like many people must be familiar with it. Typically, as I was saying earlier, the first step would be just based on all the incoming profiles that the hiring managers receive, doing some initial screening to see which candidates to even do the first level technical interview process with. That screening will take in a lot of signals, including the background, the overall resume. Maybe even if there are other signals like hackathons or offline take-home exercises that people have submitted or challenge questions that they've answered. Typically after that is the first round. For most companies I've seen, it's either like a 1-hour phone interview or sometimes even on site, primarily focusing more on just getting to solve some coding problems, to understand coding fundamentals, how well you can solve problems holistically, how well you can structure the code, how well you can communicate a solution, as well as like walk through the code, reason about time complexity, things like that. Depending on how that goes, the next step is almost always, assuming like you clear the phone screen, would be a full round on site. At least for most companies I've seen in the Bay Area, that involves like 4 to 5 interviews, anywhere from 45 minutes to 1 hour each.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, primary focus there for freshers, for new grads, is around the foundational knowledge, um, basics, whether it's like, I guess, at least 2 or 3 rounds on more on-site coding interviews, one round a little bit more on maybe C++ fundamentals,
Mm-hmm.
and some soft interviews to focus on the other skills that I talked about, like past background, their motivations, career aspirations.
Great. Cool.
Does that answer the question? Or is it too
It
abstract?
no, I think it does answer the question. It's like I think this what the students have in their head right now
Mm,
is how difficult is it? I think that's
mm,
the only part that everyone would be just focusing around. Hearing that there are 5 rounds or 7 rounds, it
mm,
does make it appear difficult, but I guess the level of difficulty is based on also the level of preparation that they've done. So
mm,
it's kind of a comparison between that and the kind of question being asked. But yes,
mm,
just getting to know that there's different kinds of rounds at almost all the people the places where they hire based
mm,
on
mm,
core tech skills in terms of
mm,
data structures and algorithms, which probably
mm,
we all are practicing right now. I think that
mm.
is one thing everyone would require, yeah, even if they are interviewing after a certain period of time.
I think the foundational knowledge of being able to write solid code for any given problems, but
Mhm,
also reason about why you chose that level, that language, that code interface,
mhm,
reason about the time complexity of the solution, why you chose that data structures, and being able to debug that code,
mhm,
especially when you're doing coding type sessions, that's going to be valuable. Even when I did engineering manager interviews at Facebook, when I was applying for engineering manager role, I
uh-huh,
still had to go through multiple coding rounds.
mhm.
So that foundational coding language skill is going to be required throughout your career.
Right.
Um, yeah, and even when I go through my management interviews, like I do make it a point to just search online for coding interview questions and practice them on a white sheet of paper to just get that confidence back before I go for on-sites.
That's great. So I guess everyone's hearing that very, very carefully, because you are doing your data structure and algorithm part right now. And if you are lagging behind, you will not want to lag behind in this specific part. Why? Because this is going to be your first stage of crossing, the boundary line of getting to the second round of interview. So this is going to be very important. Okay, so picking up a couple of questions from YouTube. So everyone and anyone and everyone who has a question, this is the right time to post it. Till then, I'll just pick it up from the 4 or 5 people who've posted it. So I guess it's kind of a repetitive repeated thing in terms of a question, but still let me put it up. Dhanush
Mm,
is a student. He's asking that he's been working in a different field for 1.3 years,
mm,
and how hard will it be for him to switch to a developer role, and will
mm.
his previous experience add on to it, or will his previous experience be neutral or cause a hindrance while switching? So if you've come across of late, maybe in your
Mm.
career, hiring people who are coming in from a different kind of background for a developer role, so how hard is it for you to take them in, probably?
So when you say different background, like non-tech background,
Non-tech, yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I would say like it should not be neither an addition or a negative in any way. I guess if you have a lot of industry experience, that shows to some extent you know how to work in a corporate environment and how to work with people, so it can be a slight positive.
Mm-hmm,
But I don't think 1 year of corporate experience would make much of a difference.
mm-hmm.
Um, so you would pretty much be treated as any other new grad who is applying for the role.
Right.
In terms of how hard it will be to switch, I think it's really a function of how quickly you can pick up the CS fundamentals.
Yeah, exactly,
It should,
exactly.
like, yeah, your prior 1 year experience or your prior academic background should not be a deterrent in any way when you're applying for new roles in the tech industry.
Cool. So I think that should give you a little bit of motivation, Dhanush, where like whatever you are doing right now. Uh, so Keshav has asked a question. I guess this is somewhat very commonly something I've encountered when I've been discussing with students. We do push them towards data structures and algorithm, never to leave that out since it is the fundamentals. So
Hmm.
the thing is it more important to do competitive programming and develop solving skills than to learn a new framework or maybe a development skill and make something impactful or a useful project in that? Looking at like how would these two balance out my resume, or which one would add on to my resume and which would serve as the basic part? Obviously the data structures and algorithm part is the basic one, but still, how much does the other one actually matter during those interview rounds?
So I think, yeah, as you already mentioned, like
Hmm.
having basics of data structures is just prerequisite for any new grad or senior technical roles in software
Hmm.
programming. Like being able to reason about, given any problems, what data structures to use, what would be the time complexity of that solution.
Hmm.
That's going to be prerequisite for any role. After that, I think it's a question of how you can get your resume to stand out a little bit more compared to others.
Hmm.
So in that sense, sure, like if you've won some national, international level programming competitions or even shown consistent progress there, that could be one way to stand out.
Hmm.
If you've really built passion in one area and you've built like some iPhone apps that have hundreds of thousands of downloads, like, that could be another way to stand out.
Hmm.
I don't think you have to necessarily, I don't think one weighs much more than the other. Like once you have the foundational knowledge, the extra thought is yes. Like if you can have anything else that stands out to get you through the initial screening as well as offset any negative signals that might come up during the interview process, it's always helpful.
Hmm. Okay. So I'll just take two more questions. So if anyone is writing a question, just post it right now. I've already picked up one, so I'll pick up one more if I find that interesting, super interesting after that. Navneet posted two questions. The second question is the one I'll pick up because it's not exactly programming. It's like, what did you do at the time of your programming part? Although it would be more so passion, but what specifically motivated you in those terms? Or maybe on the other side of it, was there any time when you had to do something to keep yourself motivated?
This is like
So
when I was studying,
specifically, maybe setting the context. Right now, they are studying alone online
mm,
through a course, and we the live interactions are the kind of the
mm,
ones that we are having right now, or interacting with their
mm,
teaching assistants to get the problem solved.
mm,
Somewhere down the line, sometimes we do lose that sense of the end goal that we have, that we are going to
mm,
get an awesome job after this. So
mm.
is there any tips on or maybe from your experience that they can do something about it?
Sure. So I
Mm-hmm.
think what worked for me was maybe having a couple of peer friends who were just as passionate about that space.
Mm-hmm.
As I was telling you, the first time I ended up building something was I
Yeah.
was working all night with a friend on building this basic tic-tac-toe solution.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was like a big accomplishment. And so just having those few friends who are just as interested, and if any time when I feel like I'm getting sidetracked or distracted,
Mm-hmm.
I get pulled in back because they are working on some interesting problems and start engaging again. That was pretty helpful. Um, I guess for me, it was slightly easier because I was already working in the computer science, like I was studying CS anyways at my job, sorry, in my college.
Mm-hmm.
So there was not as much of a opportunity to lose track completely. But yeah, I think the biggest addition there was just having good friends who were just as passionate in the space.
Cool.
So maybe for this context, like having building this online community of other students who work together, solve programs, who are teaching assistants, or even participate in online coding competitions, or some ways to
Mm-hmm.
keep each other motivated might be helpful.
Cool. Okay, probably one last question from the students. Alpesh is asking, and this seems to be kind of an interesting one. Um is there a difference between working in a tech company in India versus working over there in the States? What kind of difference is there, if there is?
So I think this is going to be more secondhand information because I've not really worked in years. But from everything I hear from Ankush or even other friends who've moved back to India,
Mhm,
is that even if there was any difference, that difference is shrinking over time.
mhm,
So there's a lot of interesting startups and even big companies that have come up in India over the last few years. They're doing very interesting, challenging work. Um, the work is getting recognized based on the skills, then based on your degrees.
mhm.
So yeah, at least what I've heard secondhand would be that there's not as much difference now. Um, I think at least 10 plus years ago when I was considering, I did feel there was some difference. There was a little bit more cutting edge work happening in the US
Mhm.
than India, but it looks like that gap has been closed, or maybe even India might have edged ahead in some areas.
That's great to hear. Um, okay, and here's the final part of things. So, um, okay, what would be some specific tips for our students? So how the course is structured is that this is going to be a web development track, and right now they're going through their data structures and algorithms,
Hmm,
almost entered trees, learning trees. And
hmm,
just after this, they'll be going into web development. They'll be beginning with
hmm,
HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then going on with Node.js as a backend
hmm.
technology.
Nice.
So, like any specific tips or any specific things on what to focus on and maybe how to balance out in terms of their learning, although yes, there's a schedule that we've built up. I know this is a very
Hmm,
open-ended question,
hmm,
but more so in terms of how to just keep it up going till they find their job, or
hmm,
maybe any sort of specific resources that you think they might be using for solving extra questions or extra set of projects that they could look into making.
hmm. Sure. Let me think about it a little bit.
Sure, sure.
I think this right. This is probably gonna come off a little bit as a repeat of the last parts, but
Uh-huh. Yeah.
even if you're doing web foundation course, do
Mhm,
not underestimate the need for the CS fundamentals, especially data structures and algorithms.
mhm,
Um, you need to both make sure you have the fundamentals right and that you can demonstrate those fundamentals in the few hours that you will get with the interviewers.
mhm,
So make sure you spend enough time practicing doing mock interviews. As I said, like even it's very different to solve programming questions on a laptop in front of a compiler versus on a whiteboard. So make sure you are doing enough practice for interview setting. In terms of specifically while you're doing the web foundation course, like I guess doing some sort of side projects or problems that you find for the resources will definitely add value. You will personally learn new things. You might find more things that you're excited, motivated about.
mhm.
I don't have any specific resources in mind for where you should look it up, but I'm sure a few Google searches would point you to hundreds of different interesting challenges in web area.
Cool. I guess this is we are almost out of time on this, and it's been great interacting with you. So, uh, okay. Uh, just one last question from
Mm,
my side. And this was kind of posted by 4 or 5 students together. I just kept it for last.
mm,
So, as a candidate or as an interviewee, what should we be looking at while choosing whether to join or not to join a company if we do have an offer?
mm. Sure. I guess I can talk more about what I was looking for when I was
Yeah,
choosing my
yeah,
first
yeah,
job.
yeah.
And at least I think that was a good framework. So when I was deciding on my first job, my primary factor was how much am I gonna learn in my first few years in the industry.
Mm-hmm,
Everything else was secondary, like how much am I gonna make, how reputed is the company, how much my family back home will know about the company. Like back
mm-hmm,
in 2011, no one knew about Corona.
yeah.
I mean, at least no one outside the US.
Mm-hmm,
So for me, the biggest factor was how quickly am I going to learn? Like I knew the career is going to be 20, 30 years. So the thing that's going to matter the most is how much are you learning in the first few years, more than how much did you make or how much respect you got per se.
mm-hmm,
So from that perspective, I optimized for working with the smartest group of people I could find in a small team environment setting. So there would be enough interesting challenges and problems to solve and
mm-hmm.
good mentors to learn from.
Great,
So
great.
yeah, I guess my advice would be just find the place where you think you will learn and grow the most,
Exactly.
even if that means you have to compromise on other factors.
Great. All right. So I guess although we can keep the conversation going on all through the day and probably all through your night, but we wouldn't want to do that. Um, guys, Neeraj has taken out time specifically for this, and we'll try to find some time and bug him in the future also. But let's see how well we do progress with the course and how, where, and how we reach in terms of taking the whole batch along to successfully placing them in the program. So I guess great interaction, and that will be all from our side. And I hope people who are there online right now, all of us learned something new about the way things have shaped up for Neeraj, and in terms of getting some sort of guiding points in terms of how he shaped it up and what are the important things that he looks at while hiring people. So everyone is posting in a thanks on YouTube. So everyone, I really enjoyed it, and thanks a ton from my side personally for taking out all this time. And
Absolutely.
again,
Thanks again for having me over. Again, I hope some of this information is useful. If there's any more burning questions that I could not get to, feel free to leave comments on the YouTube channel. Maybe and I can see what I can help with.
for sure.
I'm really excited to see people picking up these kind of courses like foundation or other areas and being passionate about this industry. It's also great to see these kind of coaching institutions coming up.
Hmm.
There weren't as many opportunities 10, 15 years ago.
Hmm.
I hope you all are making the most out of these opportunities.
Yeah. I wish I could sarcastically just tell them, listen to him, listen to him again. Okay. Yeah. All right, people. So thanks a ton, everyone, for joining in. And thanks double a ton to you, Neeraj, for taking out time. And see you soon again. And have a nice evening after this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. All right. Bye.